Welcome to this week's Weekly Talkback. Weekly Talkback is the show where we get to talk to Pastor Dave about his message the day before. Yesterday's message was Plant a Radish, Get a Radish. So I'm Kevin Beers.
I'm David Whitten.
And here we go.
Yep.
Okay, so in your sermon, you talked about this, you brought up a theological question.
Mm-hmm. If God is omniscient, meaning God knows everything, past, present, and future, did God know what God was getting into when he created humanity with the free will?
Now, you didn't answer, or you didn't go into the question.
No.
But what are your thoughts on that question?
The thing is that if he knew that Adam and Eve were going to sin in that first generation, and subsequently, then all the way down the line, every generation is going to sin, then what was the point of creation? Why would he do that? Why would God do such a thing? And so I'm left with this thought that I really don't really know that. Now there is a theology. Now I'll try to be very succinctly and keep it short. That basically says that God doesn't choose to know what's in the future. That God is a reactionary God. So God, the passage where Paul says, all good things happen to those who love God. Mm-hmm. So in other words, bad things happen. God is there to help you make something good out of it. So bringing it back to this idea, maybe God chooses not to look in the future and he is a reactionary God. So Adam and Eve sin. What happens? He kicks them out of the garden, but then he clothes them out of care and compassion. And so he is always in response to the lead, the free will of the people. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I see where you're going with that.
But again, I'm just on the edge of it. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense why God would choose not to see into the future when he is omniscient, which I believe God is. So I'm just going around in the argument.
Okay, I get where you're going with that. Because I look at it probably a bit differently, where I've gone down the rabbit trail of, well, if God created everything, did God create evil? Mm-hmm. So that question, and I think part of the problem there is everything we look at as human beings, we look at most things as binary. Mm-hmm. So basically, either he didn't create evil or he didn't. It's one or
he did or he didn't, yes.
But in my thinking, we as human beings, we're trapped in a three-dimensional world, mm-hmm. with a fourth dimension being time. Now, the fourth dimension being time is the dimension we cannot manipulate. We can manipulate the other three dimensions. But let's say God exists, let's just say he exists in the fifth dimension. That gives him the ability to manipulate the four below it, the time, mm-hmm. and the three dimensions. Mm-hmm. And then when you keep going out dimension by dimension, well, if he exists outside of all dimensions, then everything is known, and the reasoning on why we were created with free will and the ability to screw everything up is just beyond our comprehension.
Yeah, and ultimately it is beyond. Ultimately, I kind of understand why he would choose to give us free will, and that is that we would freely choose to love God, mm-hmm. which is the greatest expression of love. If you were to create something that doesn't have free will and their goal on earth is to love you back, well, if you created them to love you back, it's not really, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, right.
And so the free will is essentially to allow people to choose to freely love God, and that is the ultimate expression of love. And ultimately, I think that is what God, seeks in the relationship with.
Okay, and that sparks the idea where Jesus said, the greatest love is when you lay your life down, mm-hmm. for someone else. So if we're willing to lay our life down for our love of God, that would be, mm-hmm. right in line with
that's
with
right.
all that.
That's right.
And we look at all the martyrs in the past who did exactly that, and that would be, like you said, the greatest expression, mm-hmm. of that love.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we solved that one.
Well, now we just need to write the book, a 10-volume book on it.
So, now also this came out of your message.
The other word is judgment. It's a word we don't like to use. We feel like it has negative connotations. When we speak of judgment, specifically God's judgment, it feels oppressive. It feels destructive. However, we read in Isaiah last week, and we read in Isaiah last week, and we read this week of God's coming judgment. That despite its potential destructiveness, God's coming judgment is in fact redemptive. N.T. Wright writes, "We need to remind ourselves that throughout the Bible, God's coming judgment is a good thing, something to be celebrated for, longed for, yearned over. It causes people to shout for joy and the trees of the field to clap their hands."
So that actually from what we just talked about with the philosophical question, it reminded me, a lot of people will say, how can God allow something like this to happen? And those same people will say, but I have free will. I will do what I want to do, no matter what it might be. But to me, what they're really saying is, I'm going to do what I want to do, and it's up to God not to create negative consequences for whatever it is I do.
Yeah, it seems that way, doesn't it? It seems that that's what we want out of our God, is to do whatever we want and be free of any kind of consequences.
Right, because when we talk about starvation in other nations, a lot of that is due to the fact that, well, first of all, starvation is or poverty and starvation are one of those things that I actually focus on quite a bit. But we waste more food in the processing of food. The amount of food that we waste in processing food in this country could feed the entire world.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? I mean, even the idea that, a carrot that doesn't look uniform as a carrot, they'll pitch because it doesn't look attractive.
Right.
And so they just pitch it, throw it out in the field,
Right.
rot. Yes, you're exactly right.
But
where were you going with that?
Well, this idea that, you asked, why would God create people with free, people to have free will? And I'm gonna say I thought you expressed that really well. But I just run into these people who say, if God is good, how could He allow this to happen?
Right.
It's like, well, that happened because of choices other people have made because they have free will.
Yes.
So we're blaming God for the negative consequence or for not fixing the problem when it's people having free will that causes the problem.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly right. God, it's not that God is the cause of the destruction for human society, whatever it may be. I think God kind of pulls his hand back and allows things to unfold as we kind of determine. And it's, like I said yesterday, it's going into hell. It's going to hell in a breadbasket or handbasket, whatever the expression is, because God has allowed us to go our own way, and so inevitably we tend to be very destructive.
And my thought on that too is, I've often heard that bad things happen for a reason. I don't think that's necessarily true.
Correct. Yeah.
I think bad things happen, and then God is with us to put it back together in some semblance of order.
Yeah.
Let's say.
Well, it goes back again to this initial thought, and I can't remember what. It's a type of theology where God chooses not to look into the future, but always responds to the needs of the people. And so we find ourselves in a situation, or Isaiah finds, Judah in a situation that pretty much they caused themselves, and they seek God's forgiveness and seeks God's guidance. God is there to make something good out of it. So kind of, that's how I see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I have one final thing I wanted to get into here. You told a story of the man whose daughter is asked to put a puzzle together.
Yeah.
He cuts up a picture of the earth into small pieces and gives her some Scotch tape and says, "Here, put this back together." And she does it quickly because on the back was a picture of a man, and she put the picture of the man together. And her response at the end was, "When you make the man right, you make the world right." Now, since we can't force people to do or be right, how does that concept work in real life?
Well, I mean, that opens up a huge question, and I don't think we have time, nor the desire maybe, to get into it. But it's the whole idea of, let's use the term racism for a minute. A lot of people look at racism as just an individual thing.
Mm-hmm.
If I can get the racism that I have in me against you out, then all the world's going to be better, because it starts there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I agree with that to a point, but I also wonder if sometimes evil, either it's caused as a collective force of individuals and that evil forms an entity of itself, or whether there actually is an entity of evil that either God created, as you asked before, or fallen angels, wherever that evil comes from. And so the point in that little illustration was, if you get the person right, and if everyone can get right, then the world will be right. That's the point of the illustration.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know seriously, Kevin, if that actually works out that way, because not everyone is going to get right. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be, people who disagree or have enough, destructive forces within them that it won't happen. I don't know.
I think for Christians, if we follow what Jesus taught, one thing, now Jesus got angry at some points, but typically when he was confronted, he got angry when he confronted someone. When someone confronted him, he remained calm, and they always changed in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
I found that to be true too. I tend to be calm most of the time. I'm not perfect on that, but I'm calm. And if someone is angry with me, just remaining calm tends to change the whole dynamic of what's
It
going on.
diffuses it.
So if Christians can follow Jesus' example, and I'm not talking about just remaining calm, but remaining steadfast in what Jesus taught, the people around them just change, because they're going to see the joy, and it's like okay, maybe I'm overly optimistic, but they'll see that and say, I want that. What do they have?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
dig into, what is it? How can you be like this when all this is going on around us? How can you be so calm? How can you be joyful? How can you laugh?
Right.
Because I know a lot of miserable people who just never find joy in anything.
That's right.
And no matter how bad things get, I still feel I can be joyful. Again, not perfect.
No, but I think that's right. I've always said that a negative Christian is a oxymoron. It's you can't have.
Actually, you said it last week.
Oh, did I?
Yes, you did.
I forgot. I'll say it again this week. Yes. No more comment on that.
Okay. All right. Well, that wraps it up for this week. We want to know what you think. If you didn't actually get to hear Dave's message, you could. The link will be in the description. You can click that and listen to it, and then come back and see what you think about the Talkback, and let us know your comments. Let us know what you're thinking, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.